we're taught to eat low fat.
Yes.
And and when I first started in medicine, I'm a nurse practitioner 11 years ago. That's what I learned. I got
Yeah.
a quick lesson in diet, and they, low fat and high carbs. And I mean, of course, cut the calories down, but it's just so counterintuitive. And then when I discovered Atkins, same thing, I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. So.
And yet he was so vilified, Dr. Atkins. I mean, posthumously, God rest his soul, posthumously,
Yeah.
he deserved a Nobel Prize something.
Does.
Because he was so far ahead of this. He literally came up with this diet the year I was born, and that was a hell of a long time ago. And dude had it right. He just didn't have the science behind it, but he just knew it worked. And in fact, the guy that started doing the first research papers looking at Atkins was my co-author on the Keto Clarity and Cholesterol Clarity book, Dr. Eric Westman.
Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah.
Story, what?
I know exactly who that is. Yeah, Westman. Yeah.
You do, but I also am cognizant not everybody listening or watching.
Right. Sure.
Today, so my podcasting skills coming in. Sorry. But that's right. So Dr. Westman said that he went to shadow Dr. Atkins at his clinic after several of his patients were talking about losing weight and getting healthy after reading a diet book. So he's like, I've got to go meet this doctor that wrote this book. So he goes to New York City and tours Dr. Atkins's clinic. And at the end of it, Eric Westman looks at Dr. Atkins and says, I want to do a study on what you're doing here, because you won't be taken seriously until we get some science behind what you're doing. Dr. Atkins, no lie, looked back at Eric and said, I don't need no study. It just works. He was just that curmudgeon old man kind of thing. But he was right. It did just work. But it's good that the studies did start to happen, because then Eric has done 100+ studies all on the ketogenic diet. And then Jeff Follick came around. This guy back here, Steve Finney, came around. Yeah. And they all just kind of contributed. And Dominique D'Agostino now is one of the preeminent ones out there. In the cancer world, you've got Tom Seyfried and Eugene Fine. There's all kinds of people doing good work now, but it was because Eric Westman had the foresight to go to Dr. Atkins and say, give me a pile of cash and I'll do a study.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. I remember I picked up Dr. Atkins' book back in 2009. That's when I first got into the whole keto world. And then after that, I just became so intrigued by it. And I decided to just buy more and more books and do more and more studying. And I've helped a lot of patients. I've even helped a few people reverse type 2 diabetes with keto. So I really believe in it. So it's amazing what Dr. Atkins does. And he was also did a lot of alternative medicine too, I was reading.
His little known book, Dr. Atkins' Health Revolution. You could probably get that. You could probably get it for a couple of bucks on Amazon as a used book, worth every penny. That was the first place where I learned about chelation therapy and EDTA for heavy metal removal. Like a lot of just like alternative things that people are like, oh, we just discovered. I'm like, no, brah, early 70s, Dr. Atkins had that too.
Exactly. All right. So let's go to the next question. How many carbs, now I have not read your Keto Clarity book yet, which I'm going to pick that up and read. But anyway, and I'm sure you probably mentioned some of that in there, but how many carbs, like net carbs or total carbs, do you encourage people to be on when doing a keto diet? And how, do you have a certain time limit, like for the first 30 days or for the first?
It's a great question. And by the way, I'm on team total carb, because I don't think you can be intellectually honest about how many carbs you're actually consuming if you're playing this net carb game. And I actually know where net carbs came from, and it's not good. So those of you that believe in net carbs, listen, it came around because of the food companies. Surprise, surprise. So in the early 2000s, there was another low carb book in the era of Atkins called Protein Power. So it was Doctors Michael and Mary Dan Eads. And so they put in their book, hey, we want to create a little more flexibility in the diet to add in some more carbs. We know that fiber, carbohydrates, and vegetables don't respond as quickly with the blood sugar. It rises a lot slower than refined carbohydrates. So why don't we let them subtract any fiber carbs from vegetables, and then the total carbs minus the fiber carbs gives you the net effective carbs. They put that in their book. Well, guess what happened? It became a huge bestseller, but some of the food companies looked at that and went, oh, any fiber in any food we have, we'll just load it up with fiber, reduce it, away from the total carbs, put on the front packaging, net effective 3 grams carbs. And then you flip it on the back and you see 24 grams of total carbs. Well, how many grams of carbs did you have? You had 24, because while it's slower, while fiber does raise your blood sugar slower, still raises. And so, but then it went even beyond vegetables. It went to the grains or the fiber that's in whole grains, the fibers that are in things like some of the sweeteners that are fiber based. Oh my gosh, like all inulin was the big one that they would put in all these sweeteners. Loaded up with inulin. You'd have the craps because inulin does fibery things, but they would remove it. And so people were being fooled. And just be intellectually honest with yourself. You don't know your carb tolerance unless you're counting total carbohydrates. Okay, that's the Jimmy rant to the side now. So to answer your question, in Keto Clarity, we actually tell people start at 20 grams total carbs. And it's not because I think 20 grams is where people need to stay. I think 20 grams for most people is going to induce a state of ketosis. How could it not? And so that's why we start at 20. But if you can wiggle room yourself up, if you got a little more metabolic flexibility, if you have more insulin sensitivity, you might be able to go to 50 to 100. Maybe as far as some athletes I talk to, they eat 150 to 200 grams of carbs and they're still in ketosis. I'm like, how the do you do that? But they work it off.
Yeah.
And they're able to be fat burners, but then in their intense training and when they're doing their race day, especially elite runners, people like Zach Bitter, look him up, Timothy Allen Olson. These are like world record holders in endurance athletics running. And they're totally ketogenic until the race day. They load up on the carbs and they have all this jet fuel, and then they sustain the rest of the race all on their stored body fat and then exogenous sources of almond butter and MCT and things like that. But yeah, it's amazing to me. People want to peg that, well, you don't want any people to eat any carbs at all. I'm like, actually, some people can, some people can't. I tend to lean personally, Jessica, towards more of a carnivore keto approach. I just find that works really well for me.
Lower carb, very low. Yeah.
What's that?
I say that's pretty low carb if it's carnivore. Yeah.
Say my carbs are even under 10 most days.
That's amazing.
10. Yeah, because I eat meat. There's nominal amounts of carbohydrates, eggs, nominal amounts and I've got backyard chicken, so I have plenty of eggs, and then nominal amounts in the grass-fed and pastured meats I get from my farmer's market. Sure. Sometimes I'll have an avocado and it's got 15 grams for a whole avocado. But yeah, I don't fret about food. This is something that just, I've been at this so long. The moment you about food is when that stress is far worse for you than whatever food you're eating.
Right. And, in some apps, they measure net carbs, like, for example, Chronometer. So they say stay under 20 net carbs or 40 net carbs, which I imagine if you're using net carbs in that way, like 20 net carbs or less, or maybe 40 net carbs or less, you could probably, well, maybe not 40 net carbs, but 20 net carbs. Yeah, 40 is probably a little high, but.
Yes. So in the scientific literature, a group of the low carb researchers actually defined what the various terms are. So what's ketogenic, what's low carb, what's lower carb, what's moderate carb, what's high carb. And so ketogenic was defined as anything 50 grams or below, which I kind of hated that because people will always lean to the higher end, and maybe you're one of
50 total carbs.
50 total. And so people will always, well, if I'm allowed up to 50, let's go right to the edge and try the 50. And they might be one of those people that needs to be significantly lower than 50. Or oh, I want to be low carb, so I eat up to 100 grams. Well, people eat 100 grams. I'm not losing weight. I'm not regulating my blood sugar. Yeah, because your insulin resistance is kicking your ass right now, and you need to be much lower. Like, seriously.
Yeah.
And so I hate these prescriptiveness of, well, what I start with. I think everybody should have a baseline, which is why I think the 20 grams total is gonna, all right, if you're gonna be in ketosis, that's gonna get most of you there.
Exactly. Everybody's different, but start off at the 20 and then maybe go for, I don't know, a few weeks or whatever. And then if you're still in ketosis, maybe you can add a little bit more, see if you can tolerate a little bit more.
Well,
right.
It depends on your goals. It depends on your goals. If you're type 2 diabetic, stay at 20 or less for a long time.
Like several months. Yeah.
If you have abdominal obesity, stay at 20 or less for a little while. If you're just doing this for general health, maybe brain health, maybe after a few weeks, add back in, like you said, incrementally add back in a little more carbohydrate, all from real food, all from vegetable base, and just see how you do. Because if there's cognitively things that had improved and then suddenly you don't feel well adding in carbs, you know that had a response. Be your own biohacker.
Exactly. And add one food at a time and give yourself a few, to see how you respond. And that, that's kind of what I kind of have always taught people too. But I tend to stay within I do like a keto carb cycling. Like I'll do maybe 20 to 30 total carbs,
right,
a few days a week, and then I'll add in more